Usyk isn't retiring, but his final dance changes everything. The real question isn't who wins the vacant belts, it's whether heavyweight boxing loses the one champion who gave the division credibility and clear direction. So Usyk has vacated the heavyweight titles, but he still has one final dance left. Nobody knows who it will be against. Nobody knows where it happens. What we do know is this: the heavyweight division now looks very different. So Usyk has vacated the belts, but he said he's not retiring. So he's vacated, but it's not over. So he says there's going to be a last dance. What does that mean? What is the last dance? Nobody knows if it's one fight, 3 fights, a Zuffa deal. And I think one of the big questions is why? Why is Usyk vacating? And does Usyk vacating affect the credibility of the belts? Does the multiple belt system, the multiple world champion system, cause problems with regards to mandatory defenses? Perhaps there's something different going on. Perhaps this is a control play, and the last dance from Usyk is a dance that's under his rules. Usyk, I would argue, is the credibility. He is the credibility, or he has massive credibility in boxing. He is former undisputed cruiserweight champion, former undisputed heavyweight champion. I say former undisputed because now he's vacated. But that comes with so much credibility, so much respect within the boxing world. And then when we speak about this last dance, we have to ask, who is that last dance going to be against and why? And there are many contenders. Of course, you have the Rico rematch. And why would you want a last dance with him? Well, a dominant performance may restore the faith in boxing's credibility, because some people think that boxing's credibility was somewhat, maybe shattered is too much of a strong word, but, boxing's credibility was at least questioned. So maybe a dominant performance in the rematch is a good way to walk away. But then you have that potential fight with Moses Atama, and perhaps the reason for that fight is to pass on the torch, whether he wins or whether he loses, because in a sense, people look at Usyk as the man today. But people look at Moses Atama as the man tomorrow, so to speak. Obviously, the framework of being the man is being the best. So perhaps that fight has a massive significance. I think we're all kind of anticipating, and we're all kind of curious as to what this last dance may be. And of course, with every big decision, there are impacts. There is a domino effect. One of the domino effects, I believe, is that Kabayal now will become the WBC champion. He'll be upgraded to the WBC champion. Now, this is a case where he's become the champion by default, in a sense, because on one side you can argue, well, he's the champion because he's the best. Yes, he hasn't beaten the champion, but he's the next in line. But at the same time, he hasn't earned that belt in the ring. From some people's perspective, he hasn't earned it in the ring, even though he can say, well, I've beaten many credible opponents. But it's important to recognize that if you take that harsh position that Kabayal hasn't earned the belt in the ring, we must remember that it's not his fault. The belt has been vacated. He hasn't turned away against the challenge. The champion has vacated the belt, and the impact of that decision means that Kabayal won't get the opportunity to win the belt in the ring. The next question for the Kabayal context is, who will he fight next? Let's preface this by stating that Kabayal has had some great victories. The Sanchez victory stands out. The Zhilei Zhang victory stands out. He's built an impressive resume. But who will he fight? The Dubois fight, that would be explosive. The Moses Atama fight, that would be a great fight, particularly because both fighters show adaptability. The AJ fight, I think, would be explosive. And of course, you have Rico. The Rico fight would be a good fight because Rico has shown that he has adaptability and good boxing intelligence, as well as strength, power, and balance. How good is Kabayal? How good is he? Is he just good or is he great? Perhaps in the next sequence of fights we'll find out. But going back to Usyk, now there's a picture, there's allegedly a photograph of Dana White and Trump. So there's a photograph, I believe, of Dana White, Trump, and Usyk. And many people are stating that this isn't a coincidence and there may be an announcement coming that reframes the entire Last Dance narrative, which is probably a purposeful narrative that's been put out there. And from my perspective, my initial reaction is what an explosive collaboration that could be. We have to say could because at the moment it is speculative. And when we go back to this Last Dance, of course, we have different names in the hat. The funny thing here is that Usyk keeps mentioning Tyson Fury. Now, I'm not sure if he's just mentioning that as a marketing play or if he's being serious, because when we think about the Tyson Fury fight, even though some people will contest this, on paper, Usyk has beaten Tyson Fury twice. Therefore, there shouldn't be much of a demand for a trilogy. But perhaps the business here is not logical. Perhaps the business here is psychological. So there's a few different avenues here. Maybe there's a psychological need to fight Tyson Fury again, or Tyson Fury is simply being used as a popular word as part of the marketing for the Last Dance. So just to go back on the photograph, I can actually not see a photograph of Donald Trump, Usyk and Dana White together. What I can see is a picture of Donald Trump and Usyk together, and then I can see a separate picture of Usyk and Dana White. And a picture can just be a picture, but a picture can also symbolize that there may be some talks and discussions of something going on. So let's move on to the domino effect of the vacating of the belts. And apparently this could mean that the Mozatama-Hrgović fight could now be elevated to a world title fight. And this is a direct consequence of that vacancy. So now the stakes of that fight, the stakes of the Mozatama-Hrgović fight, have now become much, much higher. And that was already an interesting fight, but now that fight has an extra bit of spice to it. There's more on the table. And now when we look at the context of the heavyweight division, we have a multitude of guys, a multitude of talented guys, but we don't have someone that's dominant like Usyk. You know, you got Kabayal, you got Dubois, you got Itama, you got Wardley, you've got Parker, you've got AJ, you've got Tyson Fury, you've got Bacoli, but there's no clear dominance yet. So it's like you've got that domination spot that was dominated by Usyk. He was in the top position, but when you've got someone declaring that number one, they're vacating, and number two, they're going to have a last dance, now there's contention for that spot of dominance. Because now we've got 4 champions and no undisputed. Some might say that this is the worst outcome from boxing with regards to credibility. But in a sense, is it the worst outcome or is it a different outcome? Because now there's competition for these new slots. And those 4 championship belts, they represent credibility within boxing. So now there's 4 different slots that are going to be competed for. And it seems to me that Usyk now, he can see the end in sight. He's had a tremendous journey and he can see the end in sight. And now he's opted to take his own lane. But now we've got this new opportunity for for these, all of these heavyweights are not new, being a contender. Each person that I've mentioned, whether it's Kabayal, Dubois, Itama, they've all been boxing for over a decade. So they're not a decade or more. So it's not new. And when I say decade, that's including their amateur pedigree and their professional experience. So they're not new, but they are newer. So Usyk vacating creates new opportunities. So here is my final statement. Think of this. Usyk gave the heavyweight division something it rarely has: one clear king. Now the belts are split again. New champions will emerge. Big fights will happen. But questions will remain. Can anyone replace Usyk's credibility? Or was his final dance mark the end of another undisputed era before a new one even begins? So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community. That means I'm interested in your comments, I'm interested in your questions, and I'm interested in your observations. Now if you want to support the channel, simply like and subscribe and click the hype button. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.